Hi, I'm Dr. Hulsebus, and welcome to another one of my podcasts. We do a podcast every week about a question that somebody has about chiropractic or chiropractic care. People email me, stop in, ask me questions, or DM me on different websites with a question they have about chiropractic. I've always said the best person to answer a question about chiropractic care is a chiropractor. All too often, people will ask their family doctor about chiropractic care prior to going. And unfortunately, your family doctor typically has no education or background on chiropractic. Think about the dentist. If my tooth hurt, I don't call my primary doctor and tell him that my tooth hurts. Do you think I should go see a dentist? I call my dentist and ask him whether or not this is a case to come in and see him for. So if you have a question about chiropractic, always ask a chiropractor. Today's question comes in about women's health and women's health issues. Does chiropractic play a role in that? And for me, this is always a fun question because this is how my family got into chiropractic over 75 years ago. You see, my grandfather, Dr. Bob Hulsebus, then just Robert Hulsebus, got home from the war, the Great War, World War II, and my grandmother was having all kinds of female health problems. Now, her mother and her aunt also had a lot of female health problems. They often had a hard time conceiving, and at that point, my grandparents were also having a hard time conceiving. They lived in western Iowa, and my grandfather really wanted to help my grandmother. Didn't really know what to do. So they got in their car and they started driving towards Chicago, hoping to find a good doctor in the city of Chicago. Along the way, they stopped in Davenport, Iowa, and they got gas. And when they were getting gas, the gas clerk told them about this school called Palmer College of Chiropractic, and that Dr. Palmer does all kinds of miracles. They ought to go see him. Well, they didn't really have too much going on, so they thought, well, we're here, why not? So they walked in and Dr. Palmer did an exam and x-rays of my grandmother, and he was able to tell my grandmother many of her problems before she had ever told him. And so they thought they were onto something. So Dr. Palmer started taking care of my grandmother, and before you knew it, my grandmother had become pregnant when she didn't think she ever could. And so at that point, my grandpa decided to become a chiropractor too, with a little encouragement from Dr. Palmer, of course. So my grandfather then became a chiropractor. So let's talk a little bit about how chiropractic can help some with women issues. Well, we know that the spine has nerves that come out, and those nerves go to different body parts. And we know the spine itself can become misaligned. As chiropractors, we call it subluxated. Two bones get misaligned, and that creates stress. That stress then interferes with the nerves coming out of there. Think about this. Have you ever been around someone who's stressed out? If you have, I bet they make you feel stressed out too. So if these two vertebrae are misaligned and there's stress in the joint, how it's behaving, how it's acting, there's actually chemicals that get dumped out of the nerve receptors and the joint receptors right there, the type 4 mechanical receptors to be specific. And these chemicals hit these nerves and they tell these nerves that we're in fight and flight, that we're under stress. And wherever these body parts that these nerves go to innervate will then be affected by it. So when we look at the lower back area, we have the L3. Now the L3 has a nerve that goes to one ovary and a nerve that goes to the other ovary. A lot of times women have bad cycles every other month. And that's because 1 month one ovary fires, the next month the other ovary fires. Well, if you have a misalignment in your spine and it's pinching down on one side but not the other side, you'll have normal, abnormal, normal, abnormal. And that's kind of how we know that usually this could be a good chiropractic case. The other thing it does is it innervates the uterine walls. And if you're under stress, when your body's under stress, genetically thinking, the only stress we should have would be a bear attack. We're designed to survive outside hunters and gatherers. And if you were a true hunter and gatherer, the only stress in your life would be a bear or a bunch of wolves eating you in North America. Over in Africa, it'd be lions and other things. But in North America, where I am, we worry about bears and lions. Bears and mountain lions and a pack of wolves. So your body undergoes changes when you see the stress come at you, the pack of wolves and bears, which are what we call catabolic, meaning that it doesn't really matter what happens in the long term, it only matters what happens in the short term. So when you get to catabolic stages, one of the things that's really common is like having high cholesterol. And you've been told having high cholesterol is bad for you, but if a bear was chasing you, having high cholesterol would be good, because if you were to get scratched and started bleeding, you'd want to clot and live. Well, one of the things that happens when we're under stress is the reproductive drive gets turned off. The ability to reproduce doesn't happen. So if you were truly running for your life, you wouldn't stop trying to make a baby, okay? So the nerves coming out of the back in the L3, L4 area that innervate the uterine walls, when they're under stress, the body's programmed not to reproduce. So therefore, becoming pregnant also becomes a challenge. And lastly, you have your pelvis, you have your sacrum down in your pelvis, your tailbone. Now we have a nervous system that tells our body there's danger or stress. And opposite, we have a nervous system that tells our body the danger's gone. And those are called your parasympathetics. Your sympathetics are your stress nerves, and your parasympathetics would be the opposite nerves. And the majority of all your parasympathetic nerves come from the top two bones of your neck and the base of your skull, and then your tailbone. Generically speaking, everything belly button down comes from your tailbone or your sacrum. Well, everything belly button down would be the female reproductive organs. So if the sacrum is rotated under stress and the nerves under there kicking up that stress signal, often women's health problems can ensue from the fact that parasympathetics cannot fire, meaning that once you go into a state of stress, it's hard to come back from it. And this is very important when it comes to reproductive issues. So my grandmother went to tell Dr. Palmer, and he pointed these two areas out in her spine. And he started adjusting those areas, and before you know it, everything became, her female health got better and better, and then her and my grandfather were able to have my Uncle Roger, their firstborn child. And so that's how we know chiropractic works. So as women who come to see us, what they like to do is they like to come see us the week before their cycle. So if you're a woman having a lot of cramping or headaches or things like that go along with your cycle every month, a lot of women come to see us the week before their cycle. And when they do that, they say that their cycle goes better. Everything works, behaves better. So a lot of women have found a lot of relief from us by coming to see us the week before the cycle. If you're having problems with female reproductive things, a lot of times we can take a look at your L3 and your sacrum and see if they're an issue. If those are an issue, we can do chiropractic corrective care down there, take off some of the pressure, and a lot of times before you know it, you might end up being pregnant by getting your adjustments in order to alleviate the stress, take away the fight and flight, so your body's more receptive to becoming pregnant. We've helped many women in this office since 1949 in order to recover from this, in order to have kids. As a matter of fact, in our office wall, we have a picture of a bunch of kids that weren't supposed to be, that were told it couldn't happen. But through chiropractic care, we were able to make it happen, or at least play a role in making it happen. Can't always say we're the end-all be-all because there's no test to analyze these things. But if you were a patient, you came in the office as we're a concern, again, we look at your sacrum and your L3, and we see if there's any misalignment problems. Sometimes we also look at your upper neck, that can also play a small role in this as well. When we see those misalignments, we'll tell you how misaligned it is. You know, it could just be a little bit off, or it could be turned, pivoted, and twisted, and that's going to require more care. We'll tell you what we think is going on with your spine and how long it will take to make corrections. Again, if you're a woman who has a bad cycle every other month, be it cramping or migraine headaches or something like that, eventually we get you on a routine schedule. We try to see you right before your cycle starts in order to alleviate the pressure so that they can become more normal. We also have women who deal with menopausal issues. They have found that getting adjusted regularly makes the symptoms of menopause decrease tremendously. So if you're approaching that age and you're seeing the menopause symptoms, hot flashes, other things are starting to drive you nuts, a lot of women have found great success in getting adjusted in both these same areas again, both the sacrum and the L3 and the upper neck. So if you feel like you might have some of these issues and you want to know if a chiropractor can help you, go to a chiropractor who will take your films, take a look at these areas, show you the misalignments, discuss with you the neurology that comes out of these areas, and then come up with a care plan for you. There is not a cookie cutter care plan, as the misalignments, like I said earlier, could be bigger or smaller depending on the different people and the amount of misalignment there might be. So if you have any questions about whether or not chiropractic can help you, I recommend you find a trained chiropractor that works on these areas. Call the chiropractic clinic and ask them whether or not the doctors there have seen people for fertility issues or female health issues. Some chiropractors tend to focus just on musculoskeletal issues and don't really dive in this area. I wouldn't call it a specialty area, but I just call and ask the front desk whether or not the chiropractor there specializes and works in these areas. If they do, that would be my standard of care. I'd go and get the x-rays, have an exam, have the doctor go over the realistic expectations for me, and come up with a care plan based on the severity of my listings on my x-rays. Well, I hope I answered your questions about chiropractic care for female health. If you have a question about chiropractic or would like to know more information on this, please go to my website at rockforddc.com. That's rockforddc.com. And if you have a question about chiropractic or chiropractic care you'd like me to answer, and maybe next week you'll be the topic of the week, go ahead and leave me a message or DM me at any of these places where you hear my podcast, see my podcast on YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn, and maybe next week you'll be the question of the week. Thanks everybody, stay healthy, stay strong, and remember, if you have a question about chiropractic, always ask a chiropractor. They're the only ones that truly know how to help you. Thank you.